Have you been wondering if it's still worth playing Remnant from the Ashes this year? With so many other Souls-like games released after the game launched in 2019, it's a fair question. Stick around as we explore the game's story and setting, combat and exploration, and what makes it unique from other Souls-like games. Let's jump in. In Remnant, you are thrown in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is on the brink of extinction, fighting the Root, an ancient evil from another dimension, hellbent on consuming and dominating everything on his path. As one of the last survivors, you will traverse diverse biomes like the Desolate Earth, the Desert of Rome, the swamps of Corsus, and the jungles of Asia, searching for a way to stop the invasion. The game's story initially unfolds through cutscenes and interactions with various NPCs like Commander Fort, the Root Mother, among others.
Doesn't make sense to me.
While journals and recordings scattered throughout the worlds offer further insight. Later on, the Subject 2923 DLC adds more to the lore and to the story on what really happened with the whole shebang through computer logs. Like a lot of computer logs. Now let's talk about combat. In Remnant, the combat stands out from the other Souls-like games in a few key ways. Instead of focusing on melee combat with swords, axes, and other close-range weapons, Remnant revolves primarily around gunplay. This shift in combat style offers a fast-paced, fluid experience that emphasizes ranged attacks and dodging over parrying and blocking. The enemy AI in Remnant is also pretty good compared to many Souls-like games. Instead of charging at you in a straight line, enemies in Remnant are a bit more dynamic. They actively dodge your attacks without reading your inputs, try to flank you in group fights, and make the combat feel more engaging and challenging. When it comes to character progression and builds, Remnant differs from your average Souls-like game. Remnant's character builds are all about mixing and matching weapons, armors, mods, and traits. I feel like this promotes creativity and personalization, giving you a unique experience tailored to your preferred playstyle. As for the equipment, there are tons of options ranging from rifles and shotguns to pistols and crossbows. I mostly used the starter hunter rifle in the beginning, and it's about halfway through when I started experimenting. Eventually, I settled with the crossbow since it lets me silently eliminate enemies from a distance, which is pretty nice since that means I would not get mobbed to death. Speaking of weapons, let's talk about weapon mods. Weapon mods are basically special abilities you can attach to your guns to give them something extra like damage boost, crowd control, or healing, which definitely makes runs easier. Personally, I enjoyed trying out different mod and weapon combos, especially during boss fights. Early on, one of my go-to weapon mods was the Hotshot mod for my pistol since I was mostly relying on its fire damage over time. Much later in the game, I realized that this mod slaps for boss fights, so I mostly ran with it, especially in the Subject 2923 DLC. For fights with multiple targets or when I'm just roaming around, I normally use the Beacon mod to summon floating skulls to deal with trash mobs or the Hunter's Mark to avoid nasty surprises. Now, traits are also an important factor that helps improve your overall performance since they give you passive bonuses. The options are fairly limited at the start, so you'd probably end up investing points in Vigor for more HP and Endurance for increased stamina for dodging. As you keep on playing, you will unlock more traits by leveling up. Some traits can be unlocked by exploring new areas or completing tasks, where some of these are completely missable, especially on your first run. Personally, I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that defeating bosses also unlocked new traits. I remember unlocking the Kingslayer trait in particular after defeating a tough boss, and it was a turning point for me. This trait really helped put the cannon in my glass cannon build. Speaking of boss fights, I would say Remnant has some of the coolest ones I have encountered in a Souls-like game. Each boss comes with its own unique mechanics, abilities and attack patterns that made me think on my feet and be flexible with my strategy. Also, my favorite part of the boss fights in Remnant is discovering hidden mechanics and alternate strategies that lead to unique rewards. I still remember the time I defeated the Unclean One without destroying its helmet and I got a crafting material for a crossbow. Now sure, while most if not all of these secrets have already been discovered by the community, I think there's still something special about discovering them on your own. Now, going to the exploration in Remnant, the way the game does it is very different from the rest of the genre. The world in Remnant is procedurally generated, making each playthrough unique on its own. Admittedly, procedural generation can sometimes result in repetitive or predictable layouts.
Same, but different.
Frankly, I didn't mind it all that much, but I can totally see why some people might not like it. When it comes to graphics, Remnants might not be the most cutting edge or photorealistic compared to newer titles, but the game's art style is definitely unique and well suited for the experience. The mix of sci-fi, horror, and fantasy elements creates a world that feels both strange and familiar. But before anyone calls me a shill, let's talk about some of the criticisms and shortcomings of Remnant, shall we? I've heard some players complain about repetitive enemy designs, and yeah, I get where they're coming from, but in my experience, I found that the enemy variety actually improved somewhat. Another gripe some people have is that the story and the character development can be a bit on the shallow side. But let's be honest here, is that really why we're playing Remnant? Anyway, I'm not saying that I loved everything about Remnant. There were times when the level design got on my nerves, like during the Dream Eater boss fight. The arena was super awkward with those narrow passages and sudden drops, so dodging attacks are a total nightmare. I kept getting stuck on the terrain or falling through holes in the ground, which made the whole fight way harder than necessary. And yeah, I gotta admit, I'm not a huge fan of bosses that relied on trash mobs since I feel like they made some of the fights artificially harder. I tried dealing with this by switching up mods, but a lot of times, I just teamed up with other players to make those fights a bit more bearable. On the bright side, no one is complaining about replayability. The two DLCs added loads of content, and the From Hell mod cranked it up even more. The mod basically added a new difficulty mode, rebalanced equipment, and revamped overworlds and dungeons. It is definitely worth a shot if you're looking for a fresh challenge. So, there you have it, my take on Remnant from the Ashes. And to answer the question on everyone's mind, is it worth playing? Absolutely. While the game is not without its flaws, its unique combination of challenging combat, stunning art direction, a wide array of customization options, and loads of content kept me entertained for hours on end. Remnant 2 is also just around the corner and I can't wait to play it this summer. I'm looking forward to even more intense combat, exploring new worlds, and playing around with an expanded archetype system where you can combine different jobs. So, are you as excited as I am for Remnant 2? Which features are you most excited about? Share your thoughts in the comments below.